As the Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is set to present the Union Budget 2020 at a time when the GDP is at a 6-year low. The economic survey prepared by a team led by Chief Economic Advisor KV Subramaniam on Friday said India's GDP is expected to grow at 6 to 6.5% next fiscal as the economic slowdown has bottomed out. But as per the first advance estimates released by the National Statistical Organization, the country's economic growth is likely to hit an 11-year low of 5% in the current fiscal ending March 2020. But will the Modi government's budget bring any respite to the taxpayer or the market that is keenly waiting for the budget 2020? We are joined by Mr. DK Pant, the Chief Economist at India Ratings. Thanks a lot for joining us, sir. As the Modi government is set to present the budget 2020, the government has a formidable task of achieving a fine balance between addressing the current slowdown and maintaining fiscal discipline. What are your views on that? How can the government really achieve this?
Yeah, you are right. Government has to look at how to maintain a balance between fiscal deficit and the growth. In present situation, when the growth is falling and there is absence of capex from the private sector, in order to spur demand in the economy, the government has to undertake the counter-cyclical measures. However, with the very limited fiscal space government has, or a very limited headroom, it will be really a fine balancing act between the two. Because if you look at on GDP side, the government, if the government final consumption expenditure has to be increased, there will be hit on the fiscal deficit, which is going to increase. So how much government slip on the fiscal deficit from the budgeted level of 3.3%, and how much will be the growth? This will depend on that. However, still government can adhere to a relatively lower fiscal deficit target than the market believes. We believe this year fiscal deficit will be 3.6% of the GDP. It depends whether government will go for the full escape clause of 0.5 percentage point of the GDP slippage in fiscal deficit because of the adverse conditions, growth being so low. Corporate tax rate concession has been given. The GST is compensation is lower. So government can do the rollover of expenditure because the government budgets are on the cash basis. So some amount of expenditure can be rolled over to next fiscal, that is FY21, and by that the government may settle in for a deficit level which is lower than the 3.8, which can be achieved if the full escape clause is used. There is already a lot of talk about RBI giving some more interim dividend. How much that will benefit government and what amount has to be seen. More importantly, other than the tax revenue shortfall, there has been shortfall in the disinvestment receipt. Over past few years, government's record in disinvestment collection had been very good, but since this year the budget was presented in July, and by the time the other things revolve around it, budget got cleared and all those, there was less space. However, if the developments on the Air India disinvestment front is anything to go by, the government is again coming out with the disinvestment of Air India. It has to be seen whether they will be able to achieve it in this fiscal or that will go into the next fiscal. So net there will be some fiscal slippage. We believe it will be 3.6% of the GDP. If more fiscal slippage is allowed by incurring expenditure to revive demand, then the deficit will be higher. The bottom line is what is going to have on the impact on the bond market, because the money has to be raised to finance that deficit.
As the Chief Economic Advisor Krishnamurthy Subramaniam presented the economic survey, what do you think are the key highlights that grab your attention?
Well, the 2019-20 economic survey, which was tabled in the Parliament today. There is always our analysts' curiosity to look at the economic survey and try to find say these things are going to come in the budget next day. But economic survey is a technocrat's advice to the government. We had seen in the past some of the easy measures has been used in the budget or find a place in the budget. Difficult ones has always remained outside the budget. Now, if you look at what economic survey is talking about, one thing which may find placed in tomorrow's budget is economic survey talks about 6 to 6.5% real GDP growth in the fiscal year 2021. Looking at 5% GDP growth as estimated by the National Statistical Office in first advance estimate, 100 to 150 basis point increase in GDP growth looks a tall order. But still, one can find the government may go in the budget with the nominal GDP growth rate of 10%, which will be, if the real is 6% and somewhere around 3.8% is the GDP deflator growth, we may achieve a fiscal nominal GDP growth of 10%. Very crucial point is what kind of revenue buoyancy government assumes in the budget and the nominal GDP growth. The other thing it talks about many things. It talks about the government intervention in different areas where the impact of government intervention has been contrary to the final result, or the end result is contrary to what they were initially aimed at. And it talks about 4 different sectors. The first is Essential Commodity Act, and which it shows like by Essential Commodity Act, government was not able to control prices. Second, it talks about the drug control order. Third, it talks about the government intervention in the food grain market. And the fourth, it talks about the central and state government doing debt waiver. So these are very important points. Another important point, it talks about assemble in India for world to be integrated with Make in India, and which shows like it will be able to generate employment if we are able to do it. But there's a big question if we are able to do it, because what is going to happen? We had seen whatever the capital flight or manufacturers went out of China, hardly anyone came to India. They bypassed India, they went to Taiwan, they went to Vietnam, they went to Cambodia, they went to Ethiopia, but nothing had come to India. Why? Because if you see, though we have improved in an aggregate on ease of doing business in India, but there are still enforcing contract, starting a business. There are still lot of development has to be made. So these are the few crucial points which economic survey talked about.
Well, as the budget 2020 is expected to bring a cut in the income tax concessions for the home buyers, do you think it's really feasible?
Yes, there is a lot of talk about the government will spur demand or increase, take counter-cyclical measures to cut income tax rate and do something for the housing. But if we look at how many people pay income tax, it's only 4% of the population which pays income tax, and generally those people are in the middle income group and above, where even if they get 10,000 rupee in a year in the tax exemption, it is unlikely that they will spur consume it, and there will be a demand boost. However, we believe if the same amount of money which is there for the income tax rate cut, if the same amount of money is being spent on the rural areas, and the money goes to the people at the bottom of the pyramid. Say, for example, increasing the allocation under NREGA, investment in rural roads, rural housing, and other rural infrastructure, but the multiplier effect is much larger. These people have a marginal propensity to consume closer to unity. So whatever amount of money spent on them, it quickly comes back to the system. It improves demand in the economy, and which is a a major problem as of now. You are right. Once the corporate tax rate has been cut, once corporate tax rate has been cut, there has been demand for the cut in personal income tax rate, because ideally you cannot tax personal income and corporate income at two different levels. Housing, very important area. If you look at people's money has got stuck in that, and that is one of the reason or one of the factor which contributed towards slower demand growth, because there are people whose money has been stuck in these projects. They are paying EMIs, all those who have taken loans, and they are paying rents also. So that has affected overall demand in the economy. More than a benefit to the individual home buyer, we believe there has to be some policy measures, whether in the budget or outside the budget, which will help in reviving the stuck housing project. That will do wonders to the economy. That will do a great help to the second demand. But merely giving more income tax exemption for a purchase of house, increasing it from X to Y, that is unlikely to have a major impact, as long as our execution of these projects gets delayed and the projects get stuck.
The country is worried on the falling economy and no jobs. Consumption has been on decreasing mode. Can the budget be a factor to bring green shoots back in the sector?
Falling consumption, slow job growth, I will not say exactly like no jobs. The jobs growth is not in line with the number of people entering in the job market, and consumption. Look, some of these measures, what is required to make correction in these is need long-term strategy. It is unlikely that these will be able to be resolved by any government in one budget. The reform or the process improvement should continue to take place throughout the year, even within or outside the budget. Budget is merely income, if one may say, income and expenditure account, or P&L, profit and loss account of the government. We have to continue reform process, whereby whichever sector is under stress, if some interventions are required, by all means do it quickly. The moment that sector stabilizes, be out of that. So budget is unlikely to do each and everything. It can always lay out a process or lay out a reform path which has to be undertaken or which has to be followed in the years to come, and then only we'll be able to take care of these problems. Say for example, job. Now what is happening to the labor intensive sector? We used to be a major player in the global garment market, but unfortunately Bangladesh, which has started after us, that has taken over India. So is there anything we can learn from that? Is there any way by which we can bring back our share in the global textile or garment export back to where we were? Now if you are able to do that, then your ready-made garments or textile is a high labor intensive sector. There will be benefit to the economy. There will be the benefit to jobs. There will be those jobs will create income for these people, which will increase demand and which will help in economy coming out of this low growth phase.
Thanks a lot for joining us, sir, and sharing your views on the Budget 2020. Now, all eyes on Nirmala Sitharaman as she will present the Budget 2020. What is in store with the Aam Aadmi or the market? Will the Budget 2020 revive the Indian economy?